Alright guys, welcome to The Theory. Today we have a really interesting guest on the show, Tom Conwell, author of the They Are Here Volumes 1, 2, and 3, Going Interstellar, and his most recent project, Earthquakes and UFOs. So we're going to be talking to him, finding out what he has going on, future projects, all the research he's done. So stick around for that. Of course, today's video is brought to you by Kreepitikitea.com and the Graveyard Goonz. Their links will be in the description of this video. Make sure you go check them out, as well as Tom Conwell's book links will be in the description. So make sure you go check them out. But let's go ahead and jump right into this. Today we have Tom Conwell, author of Earthquakes and UFOs, They Are Here, and a couple other titles. Tom, how you doing today?
I'm doing great.
Doing good, doing good.
Yep.
So I'm going to start off kind of slow. What got you into the subjects of UFOs and paranormal? I also seen you're a paranormal investigator on top of the ufologist. What kind of got you into these subjects?
Okay, well, I've always been interested in science. I've been interested in the cosmos. My aunt was the secretary for the Astronomical League of America when I was a little kid.
Oh, wow.
And I got an opportunity to go with her to conferences where, you know, lots of discussions and whatever else. Got to meet a lot of important people, although at the time, hey, I was a teenager, I didn't know anything. But it was interesting, and I got an opportunity to learn a lot. Well, then I joined the Navy, and after the Navy, I started to work for Honeywell. I worked for them for a total of 37 years, and
Wow.
then it was time to retire. When I retired, I was looking for something to do, and I had always been interested in UFOs, but I was also at the same time interested in paranormal. So I joined a paranormal team and got an opportunity to do an awful lot of paranormal investigations. And those were quite interesting. I saw some things that I never expected to see, I'll tell you.
They turned out pretty fruitful.
Oh boy. And then I got into UFOs with the same group. And that's when I started into writing. And I guess that was approximately 10 years ago.
Okay.
So, yeah,
I've been doing this for a while.
I'm doing that ever since. Yep.
Okay. And then what was the first book title you came out with when you released your first book?
Okay, the first one was They Are Here, and I had expected to do a They Are Here version for East Coast, Central U.S., and Western U.S.
Okay.
And so I called They Are Here Volume 1, East Coast UFOs.
Okay. Okay.
And then I progressed on to Volume 2, which was Central U.S. About halfway through that, let me back up a step here.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
As I was writing, I kept the way I looked at it. I kept being awakened early in the morning by someone. It was like they were trying to get my attention, and for the longest time, I thought, well, geez, maybe I brought a spirit home with me or something, until I realized that as I was being awakened, I was getting a flood of ideas about what to do with my book and how to better demonstrate the information that I was getting. Okay, so then we're going to jump right back into where I was. I started doing Volume 2 and realized, because somebody told me, that I was leaving something on the table. That was my UFO sighting map.
Okay.
And I thought that if I were to just stop writing, go back and fill in for Volume 1, which is the East Coast UFOs, and then starting with volume 2 as I was writing, it would be a better demo for what the points I was trying to get across.
For sure. For sure.
It sort of made sense to me. So I jumped to volume 3 when that was done, and finished the map as I was finishing volume 3 itself, and realized that I had a really comprehensive look at the United States, where the sightings happened to be, where the concentrations were, and that I should also be writing about that. So I jumped back into volume 1, edited it, and uploaded it again with the information that I found from the map.
Okay.
And I did the same thing with volume 2 and volume 3, and was able to include the information that the map was telling me for volume 1, 2, and 3. And I found that to be the most interesting thing that I did for the first 3 books that I had written.
And that's is that kind of how you came to the earthquakes and UFO side of things? Because I've seen these maps, and I'm going to show them to everybody watching. In these maps, you actually are collaborating. I mean, I can imagine it took some time to get these maps together, from going through New Fork to get the sightings and the days, the states, and what was actually going on to increase the sightings and stuff like that. What was it like to have to go through and do all this research? Because I got to give you credit. That's a lot of footwork you did. What was it like to have to go through, and how much time did it take to put these maps together?
Okay, there's several different things to talk about there. The map, the U.S. map, took me approximately 4 months of putting pins on a map. However, in order to get to that point, I had to go through the National UFO Reporting Center's database, alter that quite a bit, delete a bunch of the sightings that were obviously somebody seeing a star in the sky or a meteor or stuff like that, and there was a lot of those.
Oh, I imagine.
As a matter of fact, I had to read every single long report that was in the National UFO Reporting Center, and there's 75,000 sightings.
Wow.
Now you add that in there, and that took approximately an additional year. So we're already at a year and a half just to get a workable database that I could use for my maps and for the information. And then, of course, the writing was about maybe for volume 1, 2, and 3, maybe an additional year on top of that.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's quite a bit of time that I spent in preparation, in research, deleting and adding stuff for the database as appropriate, changing the kinds of things seen, reported by people, and some of those things were obviously incorrect. I'm going to give you an example.
Okay.
If someone were to see a triangle in the sky, they may not have known that they could call it a triangle, but they may have thought, well, I'll just call it a light in the sky because I'm not absolutely sure. And then they go into long description and describe, and by long description, I mean anywhere from 1 paragraph to 5 pages. And within the long description, they may actually describe a triangle, but call it a light. So that's when I would go back into the database and alter what the people said they saw for the purposes of my report.
And get the full description of it.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yes, so that it would make sense. The other thing I did was, if you look on the National UFO Reporting Center, there's approximately 50 or so different things that people have seen in the sky.
Okay.
50 different types of things. It's totally different. Okay.
Shape, sizes, lights.
All kinds of stuff.
Okay.
And what I did was, because of how I wanted to create my reports, I wanted to look at everything that had occurred on this database from when they first started in the 1950s, some cases the 1940s, all the way up to the present, and
Okay.
graph whether those things were changing type-wise throughout the years. In other words, would the flying saucer be more prevalent in the early years versus the present? And the only way I could do that is to get the same quantity of sightings that I would look at for each group and put that in a graph. And then I could compare apples with apples.
Yeah.
And it's not like 3 here versus the 170 there. You can't make a comparison with that. So it was a lot of preparation, a lot of work. And in all, it probably took me from beginning to end, probably 3 years of research and writing to do the first 3 books.
Man, that is incredibly interesting. So now I did notice that in a previous interview you had done, you stuck to more, it seemed like 3 types of UFO sightings, and it was the sphere, fireball, and triangle. And I wanted to ask you about this. And
the 3 types were on the U.S. map.
Okay.
That was it.
Now, with those sightings, have you ever experienced any one of those? Have you had a personal experience where you actually seen something?
Yes. Yeah. I saw fireballs in the sky, and there was approximately 9 of them, and they were, from my viewpoint, they were approximately maybe 20% larger than my vision of the moon.
Oh, wow.
So they're pretty big in the sky. They look like balls of fire, just roiling, boiling fire. Okay. And from that description, you figure, well, fire, you see smoke coming off. There was no smoke. It was just fire. It was just fire.
Solid and condensed.
Yeah. What surprised me is when I was looking at it, is it didn't look real. It looked like a projection, if you want to know the truth. Like somebody is shining something out in the sky. Now, where these things came from that I was looking at, had they used the technology of today, it would not have looked where it was in the sky. It would have projected on the bottom portion of the clouds.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
Yeah, because that's the way light
makes sense.
Yeah. What I saw went about halfway between where the projector would have been or would have had to be and the bottom section of the cloud, and it was right in the middle of it. Now, how could that happen? Even though it looked like a projection, because it was so unreal, it just didn't make sense what I was seeing.
Didn't act like a projection.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
I later came to find out that in one of the reports for the National UFO Reporting Center, there was a long report that somebody said they saw a disc in the sky, a flying saucer, that turned into a fireball, just as they were looking at it. So that occurred to me that maybe what I was seeing was these flying saucers coming through that were being hidden under the shape of a fireball. When you look
Okay.
at it, the color was absolutely beautiful. It was mesmerizing. But you can imagine that if a bunch of people were standing there looking up at flying saucers coming through, you'd have a whole different reaction.
Panic,
Yeah,
full panic.
yeah, yeah. So I would not be surprised if they did what they did in order to make it more pleasant to look at.
Well, I mean, if you imagine just when we look at planes in the night sky, when you see planes, you don't normally see the plane, you just see the lights of it.
Yeah.
So I mean, it makes sense in a sense of a UFO. If it emitted enough light, that's all you would see is the light itself. I
Mhm.
actually, my experience that really got me into making these videos was here in Springfield, Oregon, back in 2019. I actually witnessed what was 3 fireballs in a triangle shape, and they came flat across the sky like this, and then it stopped and it turned upright, and then it turned off like a light switch. It literally looked like somebody hit a light switch and all 3 of them turned off. And I recorded it for a second. I was yelling for my roommates. I was in full disbelief of what I was seeing. And it's interesting because that sounds kind of similar. From the distance it was, I couldn't necessarily, it had the fireball appearance, but I couldn't necessarily see the flicker of it or anything like that from the distance I was. But I was in awe. I didn't know what I was looking at or anything like that. So I find that pretty interesting.
Yeah, the other thing that I noticed about this, incidentally, before I mention that, is that in each of my first 3 books, I had seen a UFO probably within a day or so of when I was going to upload the thing as a finished product into Amazon.
Okay.
So each one was almost like a gift that I could write about. It was just weird how it happened. But let's see, what was I going to say? I was going to talk about the I forget. Sorry.
It's all right.
That's what,
It's all right.
that's what happens when you get old.
Yeah, no worries at all. So, real quick before I ask you more about the earthquakes and UFOs, that's your most recent book, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So it sounds like you're almost more on the spiritual side of these kind of things. That almost in a sense they're interacting with us for a reason or letting us see them for a reason. Is there a specific belief you have or research you've done that might show that is something that's happening, that these things are somehow spiritually connected and want to be seen for a specific reason or anything?
I never started out to write with anything spiritual. I never had that in my mind. I'm a numbers guy, a database guy, and I think of things in terms of mathematics. Okay, so
Okay.
I'm just a science guy. Okay,
Perfect.
and about 5 years ago, right after I saw this the fireballs in the sky, that that was just about the time where I was doing some paranormal investigations, and I saw several instances of spirits and things like that. It's just that all of a sudden stuff started happening to me, and I never ever expected it. So when I got into writing about They Are Here, Volume 1, 2, and 3, I never really mentioned the spiritual side.
Okay.
I wrote my next book, Going Interstellar, which is a series of blogs, and about what kind of problems we would have to solve if we were going to go interstellar. Okay.
Okay.
And then came earthquakes and UFOs, and I started writing about the UFO databases about the earthquake databases and comparing the two and where there's overlaps and trying to prove pretty much that the UFOs were tracking where the major earthquakes were occurring. I was
Proving that
convinced.
correlation.
I was convinced that was true.
Okay.
And the more data I put together, the more I realized it wasn't.
Okay. Interesting.
So I have probably a year into researching this thing, and I had nothing to write about. You know, what the heck did I have? So I went back and revisited the maps that I was creating, which happened to be looking at all the UFO sightings for the several day events around when the major earthquakes were occurring.
Okay.
Right. So let's say a major earthquake would occur on May 6th. Okay. Now, what I would do is go 2 days before. So from May 4th and May 5th, I would do one color on a map. May 6th, which was the day of, I'd do another color on the map. And the 7th and 8th, I'd do a third color on the map. So I have 2 days before, 2 days after, and the day of, and I try to correlate all that information.
Okay.
I really thought I was going to find something. I used the same colors on maps to do the same thing with large and small earthquakes to see if maybe there was swarms of earthquakes that people were starting to pay attention to.
Okay.
2 days before, day of, 2 days after, and found very little to correlate. I just pretty much had nothing.
Interesting. Okay.
Well, so then I expanded it to 5 days before, day of, plus 5 days after. And I did the same thing with the UFO sightings.
Mm-hmm.
So I had all these maps, and thankfully I did it that way. It didn't do just the 5 before and the 5 after, because I never would have found this correlation that I found. But with the 2 days before and the 2 days after, I had them laid out on a very long table in my kitchen. And as I would, I'll go in to get a glass of Pepsi or something. I'd stand at the maps and look and see if I could find any correlation, anything that stuck out at me to write about. And I was like pretty shot. I had nothing. So I was standing there one time, and my dog barked to go outside. So I took her outside and opened the door for her and waited for her. And then she was about to come back in. I opened the door. And when I walked back to where the maps were, I came up upon the maps and stood not where you'd normally look at a map, with the west on this side and the east on this side, and you're standing there from the south looking north. Okay. That's how I was looking at the maps. What I did was I stood lengthwise where these maps were sitting out. I was standing on pretty much the west coast, looking across all of the maps that I had created to the east coast.
Okay.
It's the only time I did it. And what I noticed was a whole bunch, and I do mean a whole bunch, virtually every map had a straight line of sightings on it.
Interesting.
Where did that come from? You know, I mean, I couldn't come up with any correlation. So I put the maps away and figured I'm just going to have to come up with something here. Okay.
Yeah.
So put them away in a drawer, and I thought I'd think about it for a week or so. I ended up thinking about it for a month, and then I brought all the maps out and laid them out on the floor in a straight line. This is if when I saw the maps the first time, I saw the straight lines. So I laid them out like that, and I sat there looking at them. And I was watching TV, and I glanced back at the map, looking at the straight lines, trying to ask myself, what would cause this? Now, I had to consider everything. First of all, if these UFOs are coming from a different planet, I know the majority of them have been here for lots of years, and that they know our planet inside out. They have supercomputers. They've already been back and forth mapping the planet. So if they want to see something, they just call up on one of their computers.
Yeah,
They
makes
wouldn't
sense.
need to go look again, or look constantly, or look every month. It just wouldn't make sense.
They would have the data.
Yeah. Why are they continuously doing this? What is changing? And that was the key question I asked to myself. What's changing that finds it necessary to keep looking at these areas over and over and over again? So I made a long list of all the things that could be changing. Well, the rivers aren't changing. We're using the same power generation that we did 10 years ago. The cities are in the same place. The roads aren't changing. What is going on? Certainly the minerals underground aren't changing. What the heck is changing? So, and the only thing I could come up with is the only thing that's changing is us. We're the only thing changing.
Okay.
And by that, I mean, let me jump back 5 years now. Remember I told you the story about starting to see ghosts and seeing UFOs in the sky and all kinds of stuff like that. Yeah. Well, I came to realize that this was the first step in my journey of awakening.
Okay.
I was starting to realize that I was seeing the spiritual and being the first one to tell me that that's what I was seeing. I didn't know what I was seeing. It's the only thing that made sense to me. So what I was seeing my own awakening. I was realizing that these things were going back and forth over the same area because we were changing so drastically. We were awakening as a planet. People were changing continuously. Now, how did I realize that? Well, several different reasons. When I first became a ufologist, I had an opportunity to interview approximately 35 people who claimed that they had been abducted.
Okay.
And I heard some pretty interesting stories, let me tell you.
Oh, yeah.
From hearing their stories, I realized that what people were being abducted for is that the UFOs were flying over and being able to tell who was psychic and who wasn't. And those were the people they were taking.
Wow.
Yeah. So if that's true, then I had heard stories that there were very a psychic civilization. If that's true, then why shouldn't I believe that they're able to fly over and see how the planet is changing, how the people are changing? It would make sense.
If they're aware of the consciousness, then,
sure.
or, the human consciousness, then I feel like they've got more information than we've got for sure.
Absolutely. So I put all of these pieces together and realized that they're flying back and forth over these same areas, and we're seeing them in straight lines because that's how they're reported. But under no circumstances did I ever show on a UFO map or anything else a small sample of time, like 2 days before, 2 days after, a total of 5 days. I never did it before. But when I did, straight lines all across the map. And I
Wow.
just found that to be really, really fascinating. So they are watching us for how we're changing. And I also believe that what they're doing is they're able to determine at what point we are in our advancement, our awakening, so as they can introduce other things that they've been planning, perhaps even announce their existence to us.
For disclosure, I was going to
Yeah.
ask you about that. If what are your takes on disclosure? Do you believe that the UFOs, I guess you would basically call them aliens? I like to stick to the term UFOs because we don't have that being down here that's talked to us yet that we can call an alien. But do you believe that they know that disclosure is coming, and that's part of the reason why they're coming around so much more, because they're giving these select people or select routes that hey, we're here, just so you guys know, we know something's coming. Do you believe that disclosure could happen soon?
Okay. I've made a lot of comments on Facebook concerning UFOs being real and the disclosure's coming. Now, there's several kinds of disclosure. Small d disclosure is when we'll find out that there are ships visiting us from other planets. There are most likely vehicles from other dimensions. There are most likely vehicles from our future who are coming back to see the point at which we are awakened, and that interests them greatly. So, and that will be announced to us in, I'm hoping this summer, but
Okay.
sometime soon. Okay.
Okay.
Now that's small d disclosure.
Okay.
Then there's a capital D disclosure where the government will tell us that they have known for years, but they're still struggling to find out who these people are. That they know that, or at least they've been told that they are here for our benefit and not to take us over. That they are aware of interdimensional beings and the fact that these interdimensional beings are here because when the UFOs arrived initially, they created a wake, so to speak, of energy that hit them while these ships were moving across the cosmos, and these wakes were created when wormholes were opened and wormholes were closed, and that created a real mix-up in the interdimensional world and allowed ghosts to come forward. So, there's that kind of disclosure. Then there's a whole all capitals disclosure where they realize that they're going to have to tell us everything.
Yeah.
And that they are aware that they have been working with these extraterrestrial civilizations, that they have allowed the extraterrestrials to abduct our people in exchange for technology, that we made pacts with them, that there's a whole lot of stuff going on that they're aware of that we've given up just so that we can get access to some of their technology. So that's the big disclosure. That's the one that will never happen, ever.
Yeah, we're not getting that. They're not going to tell us they duped us.
If they told us that, then they're going to have to admit that we could have had free energy all along, that we didn't have to bombard our planet with the crap we're pumping into the air. Very true. they wouldn't have had to steal money from the oil industry so that they could do their black projects. And that's the part they're never ever going to say.
It's interesting because that's one of the parts that most people, talk about when you talk about disclosure and stuff is that government side of things. And I've heard the references of like the Eisenhower deal, and a lot of stuff regarding the government actually working with these beings and stuff like that. And I believe it's definitely a huge possibility, but I agree that that's not something they would want to come out and tell everybody, hey, just so you know, we let these abductions happen, we did this. But I don't know if you saw recently the fourth Navy video that came out. It's like off a night vision camera, and it's a triangle coming through the sky. And people are saying that this is when you mentioned possibly this summer for disclosure, people are saying this might be the lead on to it, because now we have 4 confirmed Pentagon videos of these completely non-human crafts, and they're going to have to tell us something soon. They can't keep it in the dark.
You're absolutely correct. They're going to have to come up with something. And that's why I think it's building up to that. But it's going to build up to the first disclosure where they say, yeah, we have something here. We just don't know who they are yet.
Yeah, we're going to get the drip down. We're going to get the drip down. It makes sense. I'll take that for now. I'd prefer the all caps disclosure, but
me too.
I'll take the drip feed for now for some confirmation. So I got to ask, what kind of during all your research, what kind of stuff you attended? Conferences, spoke at a lot of conferences and stuff like that. What was that like, and what kind of conferences have you spoken at before?
Okay, well, I keep getting asked by paranormal conferences because I can talk about both subjects.
Okay.
And I've been trying to get into just the straight UFO conferences. That's kind of a closed society. You have to know somebody there. And I've spoken in Phoenix and Las Vegas and New York City, a couple of them around. I'm not on the full circuit yet. Wish I were, but I'm not. And I think I have to come up with a little bit more interesting stuff to say. Maybe even go out on a limb and make up a couple things. Then you get noticed. I'm not that
presentation
type.
That's easy to see. I see you're more of a scientific method guy. You like crunching numbers, getting the data together, which I respect, because I have ADD, man. And the amount of stuff you listed that you did for your research, I wouldn't have been able to handle it. I would have got lost after 2 or 3 pin dots. I wouldn't have known what I was doing with myself. Yeah. So that amount of research you have, to me, that would be one of the most interesting presentations you could possibly show somebody at, say a UFO conference or festival. I would love to see something like that.
Yeah, I thought it would be the most interesting thing of all. It's not. It's the people that can tell riveting stories.
Okay. Yeah, they do. I agree. People do like listening to that. That's for sure. I had a couple people on the show before, Jim Penniston, Tom Reed, and people do like hearing that personal encounter story over sometimes straight raw data and information. Sometimes it's hard for people to understand some of that stuff.
Yep. I'm not that kind of person, my stuff is hard and fast numbers. Be happy to discuss the numbers with you and discuss the trends of the numbers and show what I've done with maps, and because I've read a lot into maps and found areas across the country where there's more pins, which translates to more sightings than there is population. And so that makes it really, really interesting when you can draw a list of things like that, but people don't want to hear that kind of stuff. They really don't. They would rather someone go out on a limb and tell you something that's almost to the point of being not believable.
Yeah, exaggerated or That is true. I mean, that's that Hollywood mindset we have nowadays in
Yep.
humanity. People want to hear that story. That's for sure. So real quick, if you could tell anybody who's about to read your book, the most recent one, or any of your books, what would you tell them before they go and pick it up? What would you summarize some of your books? I guess we'll start with UFOs and earthquakes, or earthquakes and UFOs, excuse me. What would you tell them before they read that book?
Um, be prepared for a wild ride. um, don't think that you're going to have all this data that you're going to be able to quote and come up with reasons why earthquakes and UFOs are oftentimes coincidental, because
Okay.
you're going to be really disappointed. However, what you will be able to do is to go through and see how difficult a subject matter like this is, and why it was so tough to put a book like this together.
Okay.
Yeah, this was a tough one. This was really rough for me. It took me almost 2 years to write this book.
Wow.
Oh, not because of all the maps. The maps took about 9 months, I guess. But trying to come up with why the maps were showing me what they were showing me, that was the difficult part. That was very, very tough.
I can imagine. I can imagine. Well, I
So-
love it, man. It's extremely interesting to me. Do you have any future projects? Do you plan on writing another book in the future, or have any upcoming projects you're working on?
Okay, well, right now I'm working on a book that was born out of the discussions that I had with people who were abducted.
Oh,
I
okay.
asked a bunch of questions to the people that told me their stories of abduction. But among those questions that I asked, one of them was consistent from the beginning to the end. And that question was, did they give you a message to bring back to us? In other words, they let people go, but it didn't make sense. It wasn't logical to me that they would just let people go and try to hide everything. They would come back with something.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
That was the thrust of my question. And on about a third of the people, they remembered that they were told to tell a story. They were all told the same thing. The 10 out of the 35 or so people that I interviewed, they all came back with the same story.
Wow.
Yep, that surprised me. And that was take care of your planet.
Okay. That's the title. That's going to be the title.
I'm thinking that only because that was their words.
Okay. Okay. I like it.
And what I want to do is talk about what we're doing as far as the Earth warming and why it's real. Looking at all of the data for the weather services and all this other stuff that's occurred. There was some commentary that I did on Facebook early on. I asked people, tell me your honest opinion. Do you think that global warming is real?
I believe in that 100%.
Well, I got probably 40 different answers. Different answers, not two different answers, like yes and no. No, 40 different answers and all the things between them. Yeah. So I realized that when I did that, I'm going to have a really big issue here.
Yeah.
So I'm going to have to answer all these questions in a book.
Okay.
I started going through my research, and worked through about 9 or 10 different books that I had found in libraries and online, and I came up with a whole lot of different directions that I could go. If I go in the direction of what we're doing with our planet, I'm almost going to have to say things like, well, there's too many people to feed. There's areas where we have large amounts of drought now. How are we going to improve the output of the areas that we can farm? What about the water availability in the world? And when I also wrote a 3-page outline for all I'm going to have to put in this book.
Oh, wow.
That's when when I realized what I had, it was too big. I couldn't put it in a book. So right now I'm in the process of saying, I'm only going to have to be able to write something that won't be so voluminous that people will put it down and say, oh, this is killing me.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to keep it short. And when I do, I'm going to have to not write about all those other subjects I talk about. I'm just going to have to write about what we're pumping into the air that's causing the earth to warm. So right at this point, I'm in the process of breaking it down into something small so that I can create a book that's probably going to be 100 pages long.
Okay, something easy somebody can pick up and read in a night or two, and actually retain the information and stuff.
Yeah,
understandable. I'm a firm believer in climate change. That's we do some scary things on this planet, and I like that you tied in the message from a lot of these people that say they've been abducted or had this close encounter, that are saying they're good. We need to take care of the planet. I already believe any UFOs or beings that are outside of us are good, because if they wanted to take us over, they would have done it long before we had nuclear missiles or anything like that. So I'm already a firm believer in that. And then to tie that into, hey, you guys need to, stop messing up your planet. You're doing a lot of rough stuff up there. I could relate to that and see that. I could see, that does seem like something that could be a possibility. And it is that climate change is real. We do got to be careful. There's a lot of drastic things that could happen if one thing goes wrong. If we get a water shortage, a food shortage, like you were talking about, a lot of different stuff is a chain reaction to that kind of thing. And that could cause a serious problem for humanity if it goes wrong.
Oh, you bet. You bet. One may actually cure the other. In other words, if the earth gets so hot that we can't grow food anymore, we're going to have a die-off of probably about 70% of our population, which will solve the problem for how are we going to feed everybody and overpopulation of the world. And then we'll have enough resources to survive. We'll have enough water to live on, and maybe that's where it's going.
It's a scary thought, but I can see it.
I don't want to get into that kind of a scenario, but I do have to address the fact that the earth is getting screwed up, and that I have to get all of the information around carbon dioxide, methane, and the stuff that we're pumping into the air, how that's affecting us, how that's affecting the earth, and how we can undo it and keep it to that. If I can do that,
you seem like the kind of guy that can do that pretty good with your previous maps and stuff. I could see you putting together something pretty interesting.
Maybe I can draw attention to that aspect that they were asking us to draw our attention to. So
I love it, man.
We'll see.
I love it. It. Well, before we finish up, I want to ask you if you could tell the viewers watching any advice, whether it be ufology, climate change, if you could tell the viewers watching interested in this kind of subject what kind of advice would you give them?
Wow. Okay. First of all, UFOs are real. They are here visiting us for a particular reason. I don't have the exact reason yet, but they're here for a reason. You mentioned the one comment before. If they were here to take us over, to attack us, it would have been just close to a ramp up to building a nuclear weapon, because they don't want us to get in a lucky shot. Okay,
Yeah.
it would have been before that. So they're here for our good, and that we have to look at that for our good, to think of ourselves as part of the universe, and to adopt and listen to what they are trying to tell us, and to adopt teachings around what they're trying to tell us. That if that is going spiritual, then it's going spiritual. If it's going religious, it's going religious. We have to listen. Now we're in the mode to listen and not dictate, because we have higher intelligence coming to us with a message.
I love it, man. That's great words. Great words. Well, Tom, I got to thank you for coming on the show. All your book links will be in the description, so make sure you guys check them out. And I'll talk to you soon. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks so much for having me, Mike. It was a lot of fun. Hope we can do it again.
For sure. For sure.